Well, I think indigenous peoples have ways of living on the earth that they've had forever, and they've been overrun by organized religion, which has had a lot of money and power. I'm going to take issue with that quote. They've been overrun by a more technologically advanced civilization that happened to be anchored in an organized religion. And that civilization was able to create things like money and power and weapons and technology and culture and the wheel and written languages and shall I go on? Happy Indigenous Peoples Day, or as I like to refer to it, Happy Sanctimonious White Liberals Week. The sliding scale of selective outrage never ceases to amaze. Here's another quote that I'll barely take issue with from a certain person by the name of Jair Bolsonaro. Any of you guys familiar with Bolsonaro? He's the correctly and properly elected Prime Minister of Brazil, who was held back through election malfeasance and then criminally prosecuted through lawfare to the point where he can't run again for 10 years in spite being voted in by the majority of the people. We can discuss that another day. Indigenous people don't lobby. They don't speak our language. And yet today they manage to have 14% of our national territory. One of their intentions is to hold us back. Now, you can take issue with that last sentence. What you can't take issue with is the factual accuracy of the first part of that statement. Indigenous people in Brazil don't lobby. They don't speak the language Portuguese, for those of you that wanted to save a Google cheat. And yet today they managed to have 14% of our national territory. Now, here in the States, most of them have come around to speaking our language. They have no intention of holding us back. They're pretty content with the land that was set aside for them. And as a conquered people, they're doing pretty well because you know what normally happens to conquered people after they're conquered? Say it with me, guys. It's the G word, genocide. That's what normally happens. You know, like what might be happening to the indigenous people of the Boer territory in South Africa. Look up the history, folks. No one was living there until the Boers showed up. And they are currently in the process of a full on genocide, ethnic cleansing, replacement, whatever you want to call it. But again, we're back to the sliding scale of selective outrage. If you really want to know how people feel about it, you should ask a white farmer in Rhodesia. Oh, wait. Anyway, I digress. That sliding scale, that double standard, perfectly illustrated in this little meme. Imagine celebrating the losing side, says the self-righteous blue hair, white college educated liberal to those carrying Confederate flags. Imagine celebrating the losing side. You people lost. You lost the fight. You don't get to carry on your traditions. You don't have that right anymore. That's the law of conquest. Except when it comes to indigenous peoples. But again, this is the sliding scale that's all too typical among white college educated liberals. And speaking of white college educated liberals, let's give them a couple of quotes from Howard Zinn, because without People's History of the United States, no college indoctrination, education would be complete. There is no flag large enough to cover the shame of killing innocent people. Oh, you mean like internecine cannibalism? You mean like tribal massacres? You mean like rape as a weapon of war? You mean as facial disfigurement for prisoners of war? You mean starvation reprisals? That kind of killing innocent people, Professor Zinn? Is that what we're talking about? Or does that only apply to bad whitey? You knew we weren't getting out without at least an Orwell reference, so we're going to come back to Zinn. George Orwell once said, whoever controls the past controls the future, by which he meant that history is incredibly important in shaping the worldview of the next generation of people. Zinn could not have been more accurate with this reference to Orwell. Orwell. Nor could Orwell have been more accurate in his reference to the use of language and the use of history to control perception. But the push from people like Zen is always, well, if we're going to tell the story, we have to tell the whole story. Now, of course, by whole story, he means the parts that reflect badly on the conquerors, but I'm in the interest of telling the whole story. So, Professor Zen, what do you say we tell the whole story? Like 5 years before the white man's arrival, the Aztec people sacrificing over 84,000 men, women, and children to reconsecrate the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan. That's right. This happened. You're free to look it up yourself. I certainly don't want you to take my word for it. We're talking about ritual human sacrifice to a sun god. Are we talking about that whole story, Professor Zen? Or is that one of those parts that we can selectively ignore? I'll go you one better. The Aztec priests believed that children's tears pleased their sun gods. So they tortured their little victims before sacrificing them. Wow. Child sacrifices to pagan gods. We'll be talking about that in a little more modern context later on in the program. But for now, remember that next time you hear about the horrors of European colonization. Did the Europeans do some bad things to the people they colonized and conquered? Oh, we certainly did. People committing atrocities against the people that they conquered. There's a support group for that. It's called Everyone, and they meet at the UN. This scene should be mandatory viewing for any of Zen's deprogramming. For anyone who has the misfortune of thinking that people's history of the United States tells the whole story. It tells a different part of the story. If one could only get one's head around the true enormity of history, one would realize that there are no good guys, there are no bad guys, and anyone trying to tell you that there are white hats and black hats are trying to sell you something like a political agenda. If you ever get a chance to see Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, you should watch that entire film just for this scene where the cavalry commander sits down with Sitting Bull for their negotiation. The prospect that you were a peaceable people before the arrival of the white man is the biggest lie of all. But we're all fired concerned about the indigenous people, aren't we? Well, the indigenous First Nations people of the Americans. Odd that we don't have the same concern about the indigenous people of Palestine. Now, you guys know I am no friend of the Palestinians. You guys know that I am certainly not going to lose any sleep about Hamas terrorists and the people that voted them into power being slaughtered by a superior force, that historical law of conquest, and I'm no friend of the historical conquerors either. But if we're going to stand on principle, the sacredness of the indigenous population, don't we have to be intellectually honest and therefore ideologically and historically consistent? But no, because truth certainly isn't a factor here. If it was, we would take into account the plight of the indigenous people of Palestine, or God forbid, the indigenous peoples of Europe, with their own unique racial, cultural, and civilization needs, their own distinct features, both physical, cultural, and religious, their own traditions, their own cultures. Is there any less beauty in the rights of those indigenous people? Is there any less validity to their struggle as indigenous people as they become the conquered? When you make the case, when speaking with regard to the invasion of the European homelands, that we did the same thing to the First Nation people, realize that you are making our case for us. Because if the indigenous First Nations people had been able to stop fighting each other long enough to fight the European invader, history would look a lot different right now, as would tradition. And no matter how much they try to belittle your traditions, remember that tradition is not the worship of ashes, it is the preservation of fire. And it is only the fire of Western civilization that is going to let us carry the tradition if we indeed wish to preserve it at all. Which way, Western man? Pity or struggle? The opinions expressed by the Reverend are his own and no one else's on the planet. Not friends, not foes, not supporters, not detractors, not sponsors, and I cannot stress this enough, certainly not employers. That one's for the sake of you docs, happy Antifa maggots out there. They are adjudicated thought crime in all jurisdictions. Consider yourself warned. They are coming from the heart. They are guided by the mind. They are guaranteed to stretch open that unwilling maw and forcibly choke you with a dose of truth cock that you were long overdue for in all likelihood. Welcome back, boys and girls. It's time once again for the Sunday sermon. Welcome aboard! I was trying to figure out how I was going to approach that. I think it flowed pretty well. Not my best work. Let's see how the rest of it goes. Where's the fire in the building? Everybody in for the drum roll, please. Yes, sir. Hard charging out of the starting gate as we always come out swinging with a little tune from a band called Red Desert Gut Stomping Rock and Roll Band from the smoldering embers and smoking ruins of the once great American city of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're going to be seeing a lot more about Minneapolis in the coming next 21 days. Better believe it. The name of the band is Red Desert. The name of the track is Older, No Wiser. Every week I get a little bit older. Every week you guys get to decide if I've gotten any wiser. Some weeks I do better than others. This week, I will freely admit right out of the starting gate, is a coin toss. I've got a general idea of how I want to flow with this, and I'm going to ask you guys to just kind of bear with me because we're going to wander a little bit, man. That's how it works. The vibe that I'm trying to create is we're all just sitting around a big table at a cafe somewhere where we can smoke and throw back highly caffeinated beverages and get to the root of the problem, whether the rest of the world is interested in solving the damn thing or not. So welcome aboard. That could be the caffeine talking. I'm not going to speak for it. Anyway, man, what do you say we bounce over here for the drum roll? See who all's on board. The OG Sinner Sister herself, the Divine Miss Emmy. Good to see you, sweetheart. Glad you made it. The Mighty Mighty Stone for the ride into Build Nation's Might. And the Army goes rolling along. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Miss Charlie upstairs, top level, the operations level of the Bark Bunker, the everyday living level of the Bark Bunker. That's what she is. She's like right over my head right now. Well, right over my head and a little over that way. But the point is, she's talking about fajitas, and nobody told me anything about fajitas. Nobody said a damn word to me about fajitas before I came down. Honey, I'm going downstairs for show prep. Okay, cool, honey. Knock 'em dead, baby. I'm so proud of you, which she is. It's all genuine. But nobody said anything about fajitas. Or we might be running a little bit late. Maybe that's what she was trying to spare me from. Maybe that's what she was trying to spare y'all from. I can't speak for her. In any case, Roman, yeah, save me some fajitas. Brother, believe it, I would have saved you some Nordic smoked barbecue if I knew it was all coming together like that. Let's see who else we got on board. Deacon Mark and his lovely wife Ida on the porch enjoying some adult sodas and hopefully some smokable materials of a tobacco sort, because like me, you guys don't play around with the devil's lettuce, and I can't say that I blame you, man. I have an allergic reaction to marijuana. I break out in comatose. That's what I break out in on that front. But I'm glad Mark made it. Jude, brother Jude, good to see you, man. And I caught your reply to that post. Brother, that fire's in you, man. That fire's in all of us. We just got to figure out how to tap it. And sometimes it takes brotherhood between people to bring out the best in all of us, as evidenced by Bone showing up just in time. Everyone is having a blessed Sunday. And Bone, you're long overdue too, brother. We all need to be getting together, man. We all need to be getting together. And I'm really happy to see you guys coming out for the sermon. Speaking of old friends that I haven't seen in a moment, where'd you go? Where'd you go? There he is. Brother Greg from the belly of the beast over in the Portland PDX Metroplex. That festering sore that was a once beautiful city. Speaking of formerly beautiful cities, Minneapolis, PDX, Seattle. It's rough, man. It's really, really rough watching all of these things come together. Um, this whole region is so spectacularly beautiful. Oh yeah, there's the shirt today. Fear God, not the government. Fear God, not the government. And remember, guys, we're talking about the fear of God. You guys have heard this before, man. And Sonny had to enlighten me to this. The fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. But when you're talking about the fear of God, right? It's not that, oh, please spare me the smiting finger. Don't break out the smiting finger. No, that's not the kind of fear of God that we're talking about. You like the smiting finger? The smiting finger, don't make me break out the smiting finger. That's not the fear of God we're talking about, people. When I'm talking about fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. I'm talking about fear in the sense of, and we've been over this a couple of times before here on the sermon, reverential awe, right? Not fear in the sense of, please don't hurt me, but fear in the sense of, I am so awestruck by what you have created. I am so awestruck with the power of your sacrifice. I am so awestruck with the way that you have worked through my life, with the wonders that you have created through the development of Western civilization and the anchor of your people, carrying forward your will to be vessels for your will and your word. That reverential awe. And we're gonna let the bumper music just play all the way out. That's what we're gonna do, man. Getting to ranting and raving, and I forgot. It's like, wow, dude, we've actually got like music going in the background, and that's actually a finite thing. What is that? Liked and shared. Thanks for the run. Yes, Roman, thank you so much, brother, for telling these people they've got to bump us up in the algorithm. Algorithm is one of the, it's algorithm. When I think of algorithm, I think of Mr. Gore at a campaign event not being able to keep up with the people in the black church that he's trying to pander to. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know how any of this works. Roman is the tech guy, and I'll leave it to him, and that's what we do. Being pretty a blessing and a do you see that picture? Do you guys let me there, yeah, you guys see this picture right here? You see that picture? How long ago was that taken, Jude? That's over 10 years ago that picture was taken, and that was the first weekend that Jude and I ever met. We worked together on teaching a kettlebell certification class. For those of you guys that don't know, one of my other pursuits is strength training and conditioning, as well as combatives. I'm sure any of you guys that have known me in real life know that. Any of you guys that have followed the program for any length of time know that. And that's how Jude and I met, man. I rolled up in one of my old death wagons, a big old diesel Suburban with a built-in generator that looked like it'd been driven right off the set of the Road Warrior. And he was standing there with Brother Sincere Hogan, just like, what the hell is this? And Sincere was like, "This is Bart. Trust me, this is going to be an experience for you." And here we are over 10 years later, still brothers in arms, brothers in Christ, and just brothers in every sense of the word. Jude, it's been quite the ride. I used to give Jude a lot of grief because he's still pretty. Don't get me wrong. He's still a very pretty man. And he's still aging. He's still aging better than I am. I'll say that for darn sure. But uh, but we are both aging, and I'm going to leave it there. Let me get the sponsor shout outs out of the way real quick, man. Brother Roman, of course, one of my oldest and dearest friends on the planet, and also the sole proprietor. Well, I can't say sole because his wife, his lovely wife Carrie, is just as much a part of every effort that guy brings forward, and has been for years and years and years and years. And I love it's been an honor and a privilege to watch their partnership evolve. And now that Charlie is finally here, and we're getting to live under the same roof and get used to that whole new dynamic, I've got a whole new respect for that as well. In any case, I'm bringing him up to give him a shout out for opiumtales.com, because they have been a strong sponsor of both myself personally and of the program. Um, they are the erotic pinups and portraits people. He's got 2 books out now on Amazon. Roman Riva. What is the second book, Roman? Because my head trauma is getting the better of me. From Dork to Pimp Daddy was the first one. That was his journey into being able to paint beautiful naked women for a living, and now he has a compendium out. Compendium, that's my college word. I've got like 3 of those. He's got that out also under what is it, Roman Freely. Yes, Roman Riva, pen name Roman Freely. There we go. Roman Freely is the second book. And speaking of brothers in Christ and brothers in arms, Mr. Clem driving back from Fort Honey Badger after AK class with a lot of push-ups to do. Clem, tell me something, brother. Did he run something like the 2-5 drill with the rifles? Because if so, I think I'm going to find excuses not to be there for a while. You know that's not true. You absolutely know that's not true. I will go there and I will volunteer to get put through the crucible, but I know he's always got just he's got some new fresh hell for us to endure to shape us to be better warriors for the kingdom. In any case, Roman and his lovely wife Carrie and Roxy and Allie and the bevy of beautiful women over at opiumtales.com. They are the erotic pinups and portraits people. There's Roman Freely and there's From Dork to Pimp Daddy, both available on Amazon under the pen name Roman Riva, under the actual name Roman Riva, rather. I started to say nom de plume, but then Clem would probably just think I'm pandering to him and trying to hit on him, and that gets awkward and uncomfortable. Also want to give a shout out to my Viking brothers, Casey and Dusty Tellison from Nordic Smoke Barbecue, the only legit barbecue in the inland Northwest. Period. End of statement. Done. 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 The Viking Longship, their big smoker trailer, is out sailing the asphalt seas in the Spokane area. The smoker trailer is out there. They are catering events, and get ready, because with Thanksgiving coming up, they're going to be smoking those holiday turkeys, man. If you are in the Spokane area or anywhere close, you're going to want to get a piece of that. They have smoked my holiday turkey every year since 2014. I met Casey. I arrived here in late 2013, met Casey in early 2014. They've done my holiday turkey every year since then. This is going to be the 10th year, man, the decade mark of that Thanksgiving tradition, and I'm happy to keep it alive because they do a fantastic product. And don't forget Freaks of a Feather, a war memoir that started off as a suicide note. Freaks of a Feather. Casey, who is passed the bar exam and is a practicing attorney now. So there are a couple of great people, a couple of really great friends. If you are in need of an attorney, look up Casey. If you are in need of some good barbecue, look up Dusty. And if you are in need of some frustration, just keep tuning in here every Sunday and we'll just kind of roll with it. Here we go. Wayne just slid in. Hope all are well. Yes, we are. And I actually, it was weird. I got a like on a post from your brother the other day, and it was probably the first time I had seen any reaction from your brother to any of my stuff in quite some time, and I was glad to know that he was okay. I don't like to pry, I don't like to press. I do leave the door open always, and I know that you could convey that. Any of the people who have been close to me, they know how to find me. You reach out to me, I'm going to be accessible. But I'm not that guy to be like, hey bro, tell me what's going on, because some people are just not wired like that. And as it turns out, everybody is okay. I just say that for the sake of anybody who might be wondering. But anyway, yeah, Larry reacted. The post that I put on my personal page about Charlie finally being up here for good got more reactions than any. I've been on Facebook since 2008, and my New Year's post used to really hit until the shadow banning started. some of my political posts used to really, really hit before the shadow banning started. A lot of stuff. I used to get like hits in the hundreds, 200s. This post, apparently, you guys are more interested in love stories than you are in political intrigue or documentaries, because that post of her being here and us living under the same roof full time got more reactions than any post I have ever done on Facebook since 2008. Last I checked, it was at 364 reactions and climbing, which is not bad for a personal page. So yeah, it's been amazing. This whole week we have been well, really, I mean, past 2 weeks we've been knocking stuff out. This week started CDL school. What is this? Survived Helene, got power, water, and recently internet back. Living in the 1800s was hardcore. Glad to see you again, Dick. I'm glad to hear from you again, bro. I sent the thing, hey, bro, text me, get in touch, and we never did get to have that conversation, which we still should have. But I'm glad that you made it. I was unaware of the fact that you were actually in the disaster zone when it came through. But I'm also, color me completely unsurprised that you were okay, because I know your character, bro. I know your character. Dick is one of those guys, like, the only thing that's going to take him out, it's not going to be a disaster. It's not going to be political upheaval. It's not going to be a bullet in the head. The only thing that's going to take him out is either old age or a meteor falling on his house. That's how Dick goes out. That's how Dick goes out. It's either comfortable in his bed of old age or a meteor falling on his house. And in all honesty, if the meteor happens, I'm still going to chalk it up to a coin toss. But Dick, good to hear from you, brother. And dude, let's hook it up on that conversation, man. Let's hook it up on that conversation. I'm glad that you're okay. I would really like to hear, because I'm getting a lot of firsthand accounts from Larry and from Wayne and from Joe Miller and some other folks. My Carolina people know who I'm talking about. But Joe Miller was up there in the thick of it too. And I'm getting the firsthand accounts. We've covered a lot of this stuff. We touched on that a little bit last week with regard to the difference between the official narrative and what's actually going on the ground. You can context the hell out of it. You can context the hell out of it. You can disinformation the hell out of it. You can we're not getting the whole story. You can do whatever you want with it. There are certain sets of irrefutable facts, right? And among those irrefutable facts that are coming from the ground is that the entire disaster response has been a total show, that there have been documented incidents of FEMA actively interfering with the locals on the ground. The government making a whole lot of promises that they can't keep. This is equity based. This is equity based outcomes for FEMA, which they have said in recent memos that they're going to have to factor in equity with regard to disaster response. I guess that means that we've all got to be equally screwed, or that if some people are better at getting their own act together than others, that we have to actively hinder them, because otherwise people less inclined or less capable might not be able to dig themselves out of the hole. Imagine this for a second. Haiti, right? Haiti, earthquake. Japan, huge freaking earthquake and leak from multiple nuclear reactors. Who bounced back quicker and more completely? Who? Right? What were the differences there? Does Haiti not have ports? Is Haiti not very, very close to where the biggest source of aid was coming from? Japan is on the other side of the world. They pulled together, and they, by FEMA standards, someone should have intervened and maybe set off some explosives at the second reactor at Fukushima, just to slow down, because it wasn't an equitable outcome, right? Japan had a bigger quake, and that kind of made it equitable, and Haiti had a smaller quake. But we're looking at the outcomes, right? This is absurd, and thank God we literally thank God that we are only, that we're only a few weeks away from what should be a major course readjustment for this. Right, yeah. Haiti did not have Unit 731. Right, right. Well, see, but Mike, if we're going to talk about equitable outcomes there, Haiti didn't do human experiments, right? But on the other hand, they were barbecuing the bodies of the dead when warlords are fighting other warlords, and that hasn't been a thing in Japan, at least which I was aware. It was slow. If you reach out to me tomorrow, I can clear up some of that. You know what, Dick? Yes. If you, yeah, you're checking in via Facebook, hit me in my inbox again. Boy, that came off a little homoerotic, didn't it? Hit me on my inbox again, Dick. Uh, but seriously, message to my inbox if you would, and hit me with that number so I can get in touch with you tomorrow, because I really don't have a whole lot of things going on tomorrow, and I would like to have that conversation with you first of all, and I would like your input on things that are going on. I looked for Ryan. I don't think Ryan has joined us yet tonight, but we are going to roll with the rabbit hole, and there were two that were given to me. Everybody right now sound off in the comments on a scale of 1 to 10 how how comfortable are y'all with regard to a discussion about string theory. Okay, I want to be the first to comment on that. I would check in at probably about a 3 or a 4 when it comes to things like that. That sort of stuff is Ryan's wheelhouse. I mean, literally, bro. He will give you all the important names of all the important researchers and all the theories, and he will do a comparison contrast. I am barely tangentially able to even get my head around that. This is where he constantly buries me. When it comes to things that are, I say esoteric, that's probably not the word I'm actually looking for. Um, Maybe Roman or some of the guys that be more acclimated to string theory could tell me what word I actually am looking for. But when it comes to things like quantum stuff, when it comes to things like string theory, things like that, I just get buried. And that was one that he offered me. And if you guys are up for it, I will commit to burying my head in a book and doing a deep dive, and we will roll with that. But I didn't feel like with my knowledge base and with my acumen I could really do it justice. So we are going with the backup rabbit hole, which is Kelly Johnson. And I and I hope that we actually picked the right Kelly Johnson, because there was one time he gave me a name and I was like, oh yeah, cool, you're talking about the physicist. And it turned out that he was not talking about the physicist. He was talking about another historical figure entirely. But we're going to assume, for the sake of record, that he's speaking with regard to the engineer Kelly Johnson that put in his tenure at Lockheed Skunk Works. This is something that I'm totally comfortable talking with, because it's World War II feeding into Cold War, feeding into cloak and dagger spy stuff, feeding into feeding into some conspiracy theory and things like that. Kelly Johnson, um, his earliest career, like he had been commissioned to design fighter planes for the United States military, and one of his earliest projects wound up becoming the P-38 fighter plane, and you guys can do the research on that. In the 1940s, he was given the assignment to design for production a jet fighter for the United States. The Germans had developed the Messerschmitt at that point, and it's interesting. You look at Chuck Yeager's biography. I want to say it's Chuck Yeager. Fact check me on that. But he said, yeah, the first time I ever saw a jet airplane, I shot it down. But yeah, the Third Reich was fielding very successful jet fighter planes at the time, and Johnson was dispatched to design for production for American aerospace, aeronautics at the time, not exactly aerospace, to to counteract the Nazis' efforts in jet fighter aviation. Here's the odd bit of coming back to haunt you behind that. You guys may be familiar with, and I'll give you another search term here, Hans Ulrich Rudel. Hans Ulrich Rudel. You guys are familiar with the A-10 Warthog, yes? Yes, of course. Everyone's familiar with the A-10 Warthog. I know for a fact that Dick Shepard is familiar with the A-10. The whole design of the A-10 was built around something that a Nazi pilot did against Russian tanks. Hans Ulrich Rudel basically pioneered the method of the low-line attack aircraft. He had the big, heavy guns up front, and he would come in low, just below treetop level, like bad breath level, and and take it straight down the gut of a Russian tank. And nobody had ever thought about attacking tanks like that with aircraft. It would either come from above or you would drop bombs on it and hope for some kind of accuracy. In any case, Kelly Johnson was dispatched by the United States government to make something to fight the Nazis. Less than a decade later, he would be working directly with Nazi scientists that were, or more to the point, Nazi aeronautics engineers who were brought here under Operation Paperclip when he went to work for Lockheed at the Skunk Works facility, which we now know as Groom Lake, which we also know as, come on guys, waiting for it in the comments. Groom Lake is area what? Groom Lake is area what? Groom Lake is area what? You got it, boys and girls. Area 51. Area 51. Oh, hey, Dick, be nice. Be nice. So Lockheed, Skunk Works, classified aircraft. They deleted humans on the ground, not so much vehicles and equipment. Yeah, right on. Fair enough. You're right. Again, but the Warthog, man, what an amazing plane. What an amazing aircraft, and what an amazing track record. I mean, it's like the AK of ground support fighter planes. You know what I mean? It's you just can't kill the damn thing. In any case, Kelly Johnson had tangential involvement in the development of the A-10, but they put him on much more important projects. At the Groom Lake facility for Lockheed Skunk Works, he was involved in the development of the U-2, and then was involved in the development of the A-12 Kingfisher, which would later be known as the SR-71 Blackbird. The SR-71 Blackbird, granted, I'm just going to, you know what? I'm going to click because I've got a list, and I'm just going to run down just really quick, just a partial list of the aircraft that would not have been produced without the efforts of Kelly Johnson. Going all the way back to the 1930s, 1937, the Model 9D Orion, the Model 14 Super Electra in 1938, the PV-1 Ventura militarized Model 18. They would lead B-24 bomber formations flying over Europe. He was involved in the production of the P-38 Lightning, the LO-49 Constellation, the A-12, the SR-71, the P-2V Neptune anti-submarine bomber, the F-80 Shooting Star, which was the first successful American jet fighter. By successful, I don't mean necessarily effective, but it was the first one that exhibited any series of success in combat. The U-2 spy plane, the F-117A Nighthawk, which was, that's right, boys, the very first stealth operational aircraft. This is a partial list of his credits. The SR-71, so I want you guys to look up Kelly Johnson, engineer. I want you guys to look up Hans Ulrich Rudel, right? You guys look that one up. I want you to look up Lockheed Skunk Works, and I want you to look up the U-2 spy plane and the SR-71 Blackbird spy planes. It's a pretty broad rabbit hole, and there's lots of different trails to chase down that rabbit hole, but he was a very fascinating individual. Spend some time looking into his background story and what basically steered him into aeronautics uh, in the first place. But his most lasting contribution, oddly enough, wound up not being aircraft or surveillance aircraft or war or anything else, but business. Yes, business. The 14, Kelly Johnson's 14 rules of management. This is something that he also developed in between developing the best spy planes in the world for Lockheed out at the Skunk Works at what we now know as Area 51, the Groom Dry Lake bed in Nevada. He managed to squeeze together 14 rules of management that still figure heavily into most corporate success programs right now. The guy is a pretty fascinating individual, and even if you find him utterly boring, the stuff that he produced is nothing less than legendary. So look that up. Kelly Johnson, Hans Ulrich Rudel, the SR-71 Blackbird, the U-2 spy plane, and Lockheed Skunk Works. Hello, Thomas. Good to see you, brother. Good to see you. It has been too long. You and I need to sit down at a Denny's and put ourselves to work solving the world's problems. Hopefully we can get it knocked out before the election, and that'll be good. So that is going to be your rabbit hole this week, guys. That is going to be your rabbit hole. And you know what? I didn't even give him a chance. Wow, that was so short-sighted to me. That was your rabbit hole. I mean, we got the fan club up. Ryan didn't even make it. But you hear that? I get it. I know. Apparently he was busy. And I probably picked the wrong one anyway. It's totally cool. Not a big deal. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming out. Yeah. So Ryan's fan club is clearly in the building, and I'm really hoping that sound effect worked because otherwise I got to look like a complete tool right now. Anyway, so there's that. In any case, that's going to be a rabbit hole for the week. Check it out and follow it as comfortably as you are willing to follow it. The rabbit hole has been our most just took a oh man. Well, see, that's what you get, Dick. You should have behaved. Be nice, man. Come on. Battle Bottle, courtesy of Iron Infidel. They are not a sponsor of the program. I wish I could get them on board because I would have one of these in every room in the house. So that is your rabbit hole. Let's jump into the actual bullet points and let's jump into the meat of this thing, shall we? Lies, damned lies, and indigenous peoples. I covered it a little bit in the opener, so I'm not going to terribly belabor the point. But once again, year after year after year, we are subjected to a week of sanctimony, and I have been lamenting this for some time. This isn't just a sudden, rage reaction or I've had enough. I have been calling it out, the hypocrisy of it, primarily for well over 10 years now. As long as I've been on Facebook since late 2008. So I might have missed 2008, but from 2009 on, every year we go through this nonsense. And it's particularly consequential in the current political climate because everybody's doing their pandering. Everybody on the left is doing their pandering. Nobody on the right gives a damn about this. You are not going to see and I mean even the rhinos, the Republicans in name only, but like legitimate. You're not going to see Crenshaw come out with Happy Indigenous Peoples Day or Josh Hawley or I mean, name it, Ted Cruz. None of I mean, Tulsi Gabbard. You're not going to see anyone of a conservative bent talking about Indigenous Peoples Day. Why? Because we're all inconsiderate bigots and we just want we don't care about anything and we have no empathy and we revel in the suffering of people trampled underfoot by our conquering will. And that's totally it, isn't it? No, what we don't dig is sanctimony. All right. Oddly, with Columbus, as it turns out, Columbus seems to be the only illegal immigrant that the left doesn't like. It's the damnedest thing. As I said in the opener, this is the nature of history. Okay, we're not going to belabor the point. if they were genuine in their concerns, I might be willing to entertain it a little bit more. But as always, all it is the flip side. All it is the pushback. If we advocate this, they feel compelled to advocate that. We've seen it time and time again with so many things that it's like I really don't even need to rehash this. I really don't even need to rehash this. In fact, I want to just chuck it all, but it was in the bullet points, so we're going to cover it. This is dumb. Okay, this is dumb. First of all, the Vikings got here long before Columbus did. The Vikings had interactions with First Nation tribes. Some of those interactions didn't go very well, and in fact, the Vikings basically they pulled out. They're like, dude, we're done. We're trying to hold it down here, but it's just so okay, cool. You have people fighting to defend their homeland. Who wouldn't respect that, right? I am not without empathy. I am not without sympathy for these people. You have, as a blood, as a race, as a people, as a civilization, as a culture, you have an innate birthright, a God-given right, if you will. But for the secular among us, we can leave God out of the equation. You have a birthright to self-defense, self-preservation, and self-determination. Period. End of statement. Done. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are a people, a blood, a culture that consider it their very nature and purpose to destroy mine. You still have an innate birthright to protect your interests. Bart, what the hell are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. The Muslim world, the religion of Islam, the more radical branch of Islam, and that, which is another thing. Let me get off on that for a minute. You have over a billion. Well, only about 2 to 3% of them are radicalized. Okay, cool, 2 to 3%. That sounds pretty good until you realize that there are over a billion of them on the planet. What's 2 to 3% of a billion? Somebody want to do the math on that for me real quick? One of my math whizzes. What is 1% of a billion? Right? What's 1% of a billion? Let alone 2 or 3%. Oh, so we've only got literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that have sworn that they're going to kill us. Well, you know what? Every one of them, to my way of thinking and in my heart of hearts, they have a right, an innate birthright, indeed a biological imperative for self-defense, self-preservation, and self-determination. The only thing that removes that is to be conquered by another people. The only thing that sustains that is to conquer another people. Western men, once upon a time, were conquerors. It's what we did. Okay? Figured out in the late 70s how to use Marxism to control and dominate people. It's right up there with communism. Yes, indeed, indeed. And when you can back that, and when you can back that political doctrine up and cloak it, for lack of a better word, in religious dogma, then you've got a very, very, very dangerous combination, do you not? Iran was okay. I'm getting off topic. Iran was a developed nation. Iran was a really, really amazing place under secular rule before the Muslim Revolution. The Muslim Revolution was bankrolled and pushed by what political branch? Thank you very much, Dick. You already laid it out for us, right? Soviet Russians pushed that because it was against American interests. It was against American interests. Same thing they did in Syria, attempted to do in Syria, to a lesser effect. But I digress. The only way you sustain is to conquer. Now, you can conquer from a defensive position. You can just put up the walls and protect your resources, but you're still going to have to conquer. Every threat that is thrown at you, you are going to have to defeat them. You are going to have to conquer them. This is an iron rule of history, and there are no exceptions. You can conquer in an offensive manner by exploring an entire world that no one else had, by mapping and documenting every corner of that world and going to all the different places in that world, exploring them with your superior technology, with your cultural elevation, with your higher intellectual constructs. Failing everything else with a sword or a rifle or a club, a spear, and taking it over. All of us, once upon a time, were indigenous people. Like so many other things with the left, once you have made a term a bullet point and beaten it to death, it no longer means anything. Words like fascist, words like blankphobe, blankist. You beat something to death, it takes the power away from the word completely. Those are the indigenous people. Okay, the Palestinians were indigenous to that region. And again, that's a whole different rant. That's a whole different rant. One that I did about a year and 2 weeks ago. Speaking strictly with who was there. And you could say that the sons of Abraham, we were there first. We were there first. I want you to Google this, boys and girls. You can find it. I'm not making this up. I insist that you fact check me. The overwhelming majority of the people that inhabit the nation of Israel in quotation marks now, the people that live there now, have no DNA that is tied to that region. None whatsoever. By any reasonable definition, including the ones used by the left. And I've got to give it to the left. I have to give it to the left. It's the one thing that they are being consistent on when they slag on Israel. They're not doing it to be consistent. They're slagging on Israel because Israel is at least tentatively defending the interests of the West. That's why they hate Israel. It's got nothing to do with that. But if we're looking out for indigenous people, who are the indigenous people of that region? It would be the Palestinians, would it not? Where are all the tears and the bleeding hearts for what's being done to the indigenous people of that region? How about the indigenous people of Europe? Were not white Northern Europeans, ask whatever question you're going to ask, okay? Because if I wasn't specific enough, I'll dial it in. There's a good chance you're reading me wrong with that reaction. Let me clear it up for you, but ask whatever question you're like, hey, wait, are you, what am I saying? What am I not saying? Ask the question over here in the comments and I'll straighten it right out. One thing about Christianity was the first religion to introduce the concept of mercy. And Dick, I'm glad that you brought that up because we're going to be getting back to that. We are going to be getting back to that. Because that wasn't just Christianity. It was, but that was a value of the West. And what was the West and Western civilization anchored in, Dick, since we're having the conversation? Western civilization was anchored in those values. It was rooted in Christianity and Catholicism. Even though Christianity and Catholicism were not European religions, they became the spiritual anchor of Europe and of Western civilization. And so when we conquered, we took those values with us. We raised that flag for God and country. We took over, and our rising tide did lift all boats. Did we exploit the resources? We certainly did. So has every other conquering people to every other conquered people in the history of the world. Was there slavery? Yes. Yes, there was. Who ended that? What civilization was it that ended that? That's right, the West. Europe, more specifically, and to be super specific, the British Empire. Those horrible colonizers that did all these terrible things to the indigenous people of those regions. Terrible. Let me see if I've got this straight, because the way I remember it, again, Professor Zinn says we're telling the whole story. The way I remember it, when we showed up, let me see, you guys, and this is across the board. This is whether we were colonizing this place or colonizing the First Nation people or colonizing the Americas or colonizing the Caribbean or colonizing parts of Asia. Asia being the notable exception to what I'm about to say here. But the way I remember it, when we showed up, let me see, you guys were living in mud huts, taking dumps in your own backyard, close to your drinking water supply, couldn't figure out about the disease epidemics, hadn't developed the wheel, hadn't developed a written language. We showed up, showed you the joys of things like, indoor plumbing, sustainable agriculture, aqueducts, irrigation, technology, paved roads. We built an entire infrastructure for you, including an electrical grid. We built schools. We built hospitals. We educated people. We took care of all of that. We doubled your life expectancy, and we cut your infant mortality rate in half. Oh, good Lord, what terrible people we are. Horrible. Horrible. If you want to look at what evil colonizers and conquerors look like, wait till you see what's in the early stages right now come to fruition about the Chinese in sub-Saharan Africa. They will beg to have the Europeans back before this is over with. But again, I'm off topic. We were the indigenous people of Europe. We remain the indigenous people of Europe. Let's leave the United States of America out of the argument entirely. Because what the left would say is, okay, we got to go back to, you guys go back to where you came from. You guys go back to Europe. We don't have Europe anymore. We don't have Europe anymore because globalists have left the borders wide effing open and we are being ethnically cleansed. Replacement's a conspiracy theory, right, until you guys start bragging about it. Look at the demographics, y'all. Look at what's going on in Ireland in particular right now. Look at what's going on in Sweden right now. Is anyone grieving for the multiple hundreds% increase in rapes of Swedish women since the invasion began? Is anyone crying and wailing and gnashing their teeth and rending their garments over the indigenous people of Scandinavia? The mass attacks and gang rapes taking place on German women, French women, Irish women, the grooming gangs running loose in the UK, children being raped, being murdered, being trafficked. And this isn't even a proper colonization. No conquering power is coming in there. They just left the door open, and these people are doing what they do. Is anyone wailing and moaning and gnashing their teeth for the horrors that are being inflicted upon the indigenous people of Europe, nobody cares. You know what? I don't expect them to. I don't expect them to. Not even my own people. Not even my own people anymore. I don't expect them to have any sympathy for it. Because this is how twisted up. This is how twisted up we've become. We have become staunch advocates for the self-defense, self-preservation, and self-determination of every people, every tribe, every culture, every race, every bloodline, every civilization on the world except our own. And we are reaping it. So I tell you what, I will eat the blame for that. Nobody made us do that. They used their own weakness against us. As Dick was saying, that concept of mercy. We have always been the first conquerors in the history of the world to do anything but finish the job once we had conquered a people. I take that back. Genghis Khan. Okay? And we could have modeled ourselves on the Khan with what he did. He basically brought it to them and committed these inspired acts of violence. And once it was done, and they had seen the horror of which the Khan was capable, the Khan gave him the option. Hey, we could just wreck you guys, or you guys could become part of us. Assimilate. We'll be cool. Everything's good. You raise up a hand against us, we will take it back to plan A. What do you think, man? You want to hang out and be cool, or you want to vanish from the pages of history? Your call. And once a conquered culture was welcomed into their culture, they got to reap all of the benefits. They ate just as well. They were able to ply their trade just as well. They were able to establish trade routes that would have been unavailable to them without the protection of the Khan. You get me? This is what the West brought to all those indigenous people that we colonized. This is what we did. Say what you want, coded speech, dog whistle, whatever. What you can't tell me is that I'm being factually inaccurate. Dick. The Romans got tired of dealing with the Jews when that region was called Judah. They had a king, currency, export, product. The Jews were fighting amongst themselves. I don't recall the other. I don't recall the other faction. I like it though. I like it because you at least open the history book. Rome came in and said "F you all" and decimated Judah. Yes, pretty much. Pretty much. That was the history of how it rolled. That single aspect of it, in and of itself, boom, inside that box, totally accurate statement. Yes. Um, and they said yes, and we're going to change. Right? I'm struggling with, dude. It's okay, man. Struggle with spelling. I struggle with remembering my own name. Point being this, and Rome as well, because what was Rome but the birth? The Greeks and the Romans, those were the roots of the West. Those were the roots of Western civilization. And when they conquered a people, you were given options. Same as what happened in Judah, right? Same as what happened to any number of other tribes that the Romans conquered. Same as the Khan. Do you want to be part of the empire or not? Because we can just come in here and burn the rest of this out. And who knows how many they did? We wouldn't know because they were literally disappeared from the pages of history. They were literally driven straight out of the historical record by a superior force that conquered them. But something unique, almost unique to the West. And that is, as Dick pointed out earlier, rooted in Christianity, Catholicism, mercy. What happened to the First Nations people at the hands of Columbus and any number of other European explorers may not seem too damn merciful. Yes. Okay, I see what you were saying earlier when you were like, "What?" No, I get it. I get it. That I'm talking about the DNA of that region, right? I understand that there were no true Palestinians. I get that, and you and I are boom, we're simpatico on that. What I was speaking to, and I probably just phrased it badly, was the fact that those people with that DNA inhabiting that region, okay, when you compare that to the DNA from the people who are living there now, they can trace their genetic roots back to that geographical part of the world all those years ago. The people who currently occupy that space, the Israelis that have come in since 1948, do a little bit of homework. They cannot establish that DNA link to that region. They can't do it. And people would say, well, yeah, that's because they ran them all out, and they were, the diaspora for, okay, cool. But then that leads us to other uncomfortable questions like 109. I'm just going to leave that 109 float, and we're going to get back on topic here. Dick, it's funny that you're lamenting Ryan not being here, but you're taking me. Apparently, you and Ryan just switched today, because today it's your job to take me off my train of thought. The hell even was I? The indigenous people. The indigenous people. We made provisions for the indigenous people that we conquered. We did that. We, yes, Europeans, the West. When we conquered, when we colonized, we made provisions for the conquered people. We did not have to do that. We were not obligated to do that by any stretch of the imagination. At the peak of our colonizing sub-Saharan Africa, slavery was largely over. Why? Because we ended it. The only places where it still existed was sub-Saharan Africa, trading with other sub-Saharan Africans. And to this day, the only place in the world outside of human sex trafficking and other human trafficking, which is a rant for another day, where slavery still goes on among the indigenous people, is sub-Saharan Africa. So don't tell me how horrible we were. Every conqueror is horrible. Establish some sense of historical balance. Because I promise you, if the trends continue in Europe, our conquerors are not going to show any mercy. And Dick, I'm glad that you brought up not only mercy, but Christianity, and in particular, that mercy in particular. Because Rhodesia, you got me thinking about Rhodesia. We don't use the Z word in my house, so spare me the updated maps. Rhodesia. When it comes to mercy, conquerors versus the conquered. But when you brought up that the communists, Dick, when you brought up that the communists had backed, that the Marxists and communists had backed some of those regimes, the radical Islamist in the Muslim world and the radical tribal warlords in sub-Saharan Africa. What happened in Rhodesia when the Marxists and Robert Mugabe and his people took control? Now, were there atrocities committed in the founding of Rhodesia? I mean, from Cecil Rhodes on up, right? Sure. Were there resources exploited? Depends on the definition. Because they were just sitting on the ground with nobody doing anything with it. And with those resources that were exploited and stolen, they provided almost universal employment. They built infrastructure. They built factories, they built an electrical grid, they built roads, they built schools, they built hospitals. Everyone in Rhodesia, black, white, and otherwise, everyone in Rhodesia prospered. That one country, Rhodesia, one country, fed 2/3 of the entire African continent. One country did that. But a white minority ruled a black majority. Okay, you're right. That's true. In Rhodesia, a white minority government ruled over a black majority. So what happened in the 70s? Robert Mugabe, 60s, 70s, Marxist insurgencies. Robert Mugabe comes into power. The indigenous people, well, they shook off the shackles of the conquerors. They went in, butchered every white farmer they could lay hands to, took their lands, equitably redistributed those lands to whoever was warlord in charge that particular week, ate the seed grain the very first season. So by the second season, there were famines. But the white minority government wasn't ruling over a black majority anymore. So equity's been restored, and there's no colonizers, and the indigenous people were back in control. Look up Rhodesia. Oh, wait, they don't even call it Rhodesia anymore. But look up Robert Mugabe. Look up what he did to the economy. Look at the horrific levels of atrocity and violence that have gone on there. My 80s kids, same basic thing in South Africa. Same thing. White minority government ruling over a black majority population, right? We could make the argument there about the indigenous people, because in what is modern day South Africa, right? Thank you. I was just about to jump under the Boer genocide there, buddy. Yeah, possibly worst inflation in human history too, at least since the Weimar Republic. South Africa, in what is modern day South Africa, Johannesburg, all the developed areas of modern day South Africa, when the Dutch got there and the Europeans got there, no one was living there. Literally no one was living there. It wasn't even considered arable land. Nobody wanted to farm there. There was nothing to plant. There was nothing to gather. There were game animals, you had fishing on the cut. That was it. But the Europeans did, and they built that area out. So who is indigenous? Realistically, no one. But if we're going to say the people who are on that continent, Africa for the Africans, okay, cool. The Africans are your indigenous people. South Africa, you had a white minority government ruling over a black majority. You had conquerors ruling over an indigenous people. Cape Town Massacre, how many? Somebody want to do the fact check for me on that real quick? Cape Town Massacre, what? Couple hundred folks? Couple hundred, maybe? How many people are killed every day under the rule of the African National Congress? How many under the ANC? Joburg, which used to be a safe and bright and beautiful city, is now the carjacking and rape capital of the world. But the conquerors were thrown out, and the indigenous people were given the rule. You want your country back? Here you go. Guys that grew up in the 80s, we all remember it. We all remember it. Apartheid, horrible. Apartheid, horrible. Apartheid, horrible. The same people, by the way, and again, I have no dog in the Israel-Gaza fight. It's one of those, there are not enough FUs to go around as far as I'm concerned for both sides. But the same people, apartheid bad, apartheid bad, apartheid bad, couldn't be bothered for the same level of outrage for what essentially was an apartheid state in Israel. Not saying that it shouldn't be that way. Not saying that I'm favoring one side or the other. I don't have a dog in that fight. I'm saying if you're going to call something something, then that's got to apply across the board. Apartheid bad, apartheid bad. So we ended apartheid. And we gave the rule back to the indigenous people. And how did that work out? When you have conquerors and you have indigenous people, if the indigenous people had a festering sore of a country, a festering sore of a civilization or culture going on before the conquerors showed up, and then run out the conquerors, you don't get to spend the next 20 to 40 years blaming the conquerors for why you don't have a functioning country. It was a festering sore when we got there. We picked it up and made it work. You decided, screw you, colonizer. We want to give it back to the indigenous people. And how'd that work out? This isn't hate. This is a simple statement of fact. It's a sliding scale and very typical among the American left. There are no principles. There are no objective truths for these people. They're completely based on emotion. And it sounds really good and it makes their feelings get all feely when they can make themselves feel good about supporting the right cause. You ask these people to actually you ask these people to actually demonstrate on behalf of First Nation people, do something, actually go out onto the res and hand out food aid. You can get them to go to a First Nations casino. There are a lot of problems on the res right now, people. A lot of problems. I'm up here in Spokane, Washington. Got the Kalispell Council of Tribes. We got the res right up the road. See it all the time. There are a lot of problems on the res. Where are these college kids on Indigenous Peoples Day? Where are they? Do anything to make it better? No, they're doing things to make themselves feel better. I posted, I'm on the right side of history, not like you, bigot. Cool. Get on the res and do some service work, or go sit down at the kids' table where you belong. Candle pissers, man. Not out here cursing the darkness. Senator Joe Biden, indeed. There you go with that Z word. Zimbabwe's worse than the Weimar Republic. Let me see if I can find the actual numbers. Okay, cool. Right on. Yep, $100 trillion bills. Weimar only got to 50 trillion marks. Okay, cool. Right. And this is why I love you, Roman. This is why I love you. You keep me honest there. What? Weimar Republic was worse. So was I right or was I wrong? Oh, Roman, you're killing me right now, bro. You're killing me. Doesn't matter. I mean, the point remains the same. The salient point remains the same, and I know you guys know that. This is the essence of it, folks. Everybody was indigenous people once upon a time. The law of conquest is universal. It's worked out in our favor, speaking with regard to Western civilization and white Northern European blood. It's worked out in our favor. And then we got all about the pity. And then we got all about the guilt. And now we are going to be the first culture in the history of the world to have explored, mapped, conquered, colonized, lifted up, advanced, revolutionized the entire planet, making everyone's lives better in the process on balance, and then give it all back out of some misplaced sense of guilt for the indigenous people. Keep in mind, when you are talking about we get what we deserve with our open southern border here in the United States, yeah, now you get to see what it feels like. Bro, you're making our point, not yours. If they're taking it back, let them take it back. If the southwestern United States is, in fact, Aztlan, make that case with your knuckles, not your mouth. Make that case with your knuckles and not the womb. Make your case with your knuckles and not the misplaced guilt of brainwashed conquerors. Because we're not that far away geographically. And right now, we can look a few hundred miles to the south and see what a bang up job the indigenous people are doing for their own nation. Boy, I hope I didn't come off like I was advocating that. It's not someone's right. Of course it's not. You are listening, right? Let them make the case, because we can look a couple hundred miles to the south of us and see what the indigenous people of that region are doing in the way of creating culture, in the way of creating government, in the way of creating anything but a failed narco terrorist state and a festering sore on the face of a continent. In spite of the resources that they have at their disposal, including oil, can't make it work. Looking across the Atlantic Ocean to the other side, sub-Saharan Africa, in spite of being the most resource-rich continent on the planet, in spite of what Guns, Germs, and Steel guy tried to pass off in the most bizarre act of intellectual gymnastics I've ever seen, they couldn't make it work. We handed it back to them, and they can't make it work. Who's coming in now? The Chinese. And I'm going to tell you something. Chinese communists could give a plumber's about indigenous people of anywhere. They're unbothered by guilt. In fact, they know that we are bothered by guilt, and they use that against us. So stop. Right. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Proverbial you. You got it right. You got to do the little air quotes. You, not you, but you. They don't care. The communist Chinese do not care. Guess what? The communist Chinese have every bit the right as the indigenous people of that region. Self-defense, self-preservation, self-determination. I don't want to take that away from them. But again, that indigenous peoples thing keeps coming to what's our favorite D word? It's our favorite D word. Diversity. Diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength. Let me ask you something. Japan is roughly 98% what? Japanese, right? So, hey, Roman, you fact check me on that. Japan, roughly 98%. And just now, they're trying. I just now heard the word that they're xenophobic. Biden actually said that a couple of months back. They're xenophobic people. We got to flood them with them. Japan is 98% Japanese. China, in spite of the different ethnicities within that, is, culturally 99% what? Chinese. And their minorities, they actively persecute. Ask a Uyghur if you can find one. Sub-Saharan Africa, while they may not be united culturally, racially, you're looking at almost exclusively, but for the southernmost part of South Africa, you're looking at a good 99-point repeating decimal black. Are you not? Is anyone suggesting that China has a diversity problem that can only be fixed by flooding China with citizens and diasporic people of cultures that are completely incompatible with their own? The only way to solve China's diversity problem is by flooding them with refugees and asylum seekers from African nations and from the Muslim world. Is anybody suggesting that China needs to do that, in spite of the fact that they're 90+% Chinese? Nope. Yeah, right. Japan, same thing. Is anyone saying that Japan, Biden did finally just a couple of months ago, he actually made the suggestion. You can look this up. Say Biden says Japanese are xenophobic. Go Google that. Post me a link over here in the comments. 98% Japanese. Anybody suggesting, outside of the occasional, that they have a diversity problem? Is anyone seriously suggesting that they have a diversity problem? And the only way we can fix that is by flooding Japan with third world migrants from Haiti, Sub-Saharan Africa, Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone, any number of African nations that you can't find on a map, or asylum seekers from the Muslim world. Is anybody suggesting that for Japan? No. Is anyone suggesting that Mexico, okay, even though, granted, they're not all Mexican, they're Salvadoran, Guatemalan, Nicaraguan, all that, but you're looking at a good 90+% Latino. Is anybody saying that Mexico has a diversity problem that can only be cured by flooding Mexico and other South American countries with third world immigrants from Sub-Saharan Africa and from the Middle East? Culturally incompatible. It's the only way to solve the diversity problem. And after all, diversity is our greatest strength. Anybody? No, right. So why is that a thing, particularly with America and Europe? Why? I'll wait. If you've got a rational explanation for why this isn't ethnic cleansing, I'll wait. But what I won't do is hear the arguments expecting sympathy for the indigenous people of this, that, and the other when you have no respect for the indigenous people of my home continent. You're either in it or you're talking it without walking it. And if you're talking it without walking it, that means you have an agenda. Now, those of us who are paying attention know what that agenda is. We watch this sanctimonious self-flagellation ritual that you guys do every year around Columbus Day. Oh, bad colonizers, whack, whack. Oh, terrible color, whack, whack. Indigenous people, whack, whack. We watch this nonsense every year. The difference between you and us, perfectly valid question. I asked it a couple of weeks ago, in fact. The difference between us and them is that we don't want to see them smashed into gulags or killed. We are guilty of thought crime for refusing to accept this narrative. We are guilty of thought crime for refusing to accept the absurdity that diversity is our strength. We are guilty of thought crime for refusing to accept the absurdity that America was a melting pot. America is not a melting pot. Until the 1920s, 90% of immigration to the United States came from one of three countries. We've already been over this: England, Ireland, Germany. 90%. In the 1930s, it started to shift on the West Coast, and prior to the 1930s, somewhat on the West Coast, you had Asians. And you know what? Asians assimilated just fine. There were some issues, but ultimately, they not only assimilated, they prospered. Is that a racial thing or is that a cultural thing? In the 1930s, on the East Coast, it started shifting to Poland, Italy, and Russia. And even with those cultures, there were some knocking of heads. But ultimately, they assimilated. In 1965, everything changed. They actually go out of their way to prevent immigration from Europe now. The only Asian immigration they want are people who can come in here and replace American tech workers by working for less money. Those H-1B visas. Roman could tell you a few things about that. So I don't want to hear about Indigenous people anymore. I don't want to hear about Indigenous Peoples Day. I don't want to hear any of this nonsense. We're done. I would rather you say what you mean. That you are a self-loathing cuck who has lost even the most tangential connection to the roots of who you are as a human being. You know what's interesting in the sense of nationalism? And brace yourself. I hope you're sitting down. Brother Malcolm X, one of the greatest speeches he ever did was, "Who taught you to hate yourself?" Who taught you to hate yourself? You guys should look that up. In fact, there's a homework assignment for you. Look up that speech. You should probably also do a quick YouTube search while you're there for what Brother Malcolm had to say about white liberals. Should probably look that up. You can find that entertaining. Who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to reject your own complexion? Who taught you to hate your own culture so much that you would try to adopt the cultural trappings of someone else's culture? Who taught you to hate your own skin, your own hair, the way that you speak, the way that you were brought up to speak, your own educational process, your own cultural roots? Brother Malcolm covered all that. I think guilty Whitey right now could use an honest to God dose of Brother Malcolm sooner than later. Which leads me on to the next bullet point, and look who decided to join us. About the dark roots of expertise. What did we go over in the opening? Me and Cletus just met off Boston. Apparently she's not a pit bull fan. Well, no, you know what? That's bait. I'm going to be the meme right now. That's bait. No, I'm not even going to do it, Ryan. Already got Dick taking me off my thought process right now. I can't handle both of y'all right now. I can only handle one person shaking up my train of thought at a time, or this sucker's going to come derailed. Anyway, that leads me on to the second and more important bullet point. What did we go over in the opening? You guys remember about Zen? There is no flag large enough to cover the shame of killing innocent people. Wah, wah, wah. But Zen, with regard to Orwell, whoever controls the past controls the future, and by which he meant that history is incredibly important in shaping the worldview of the next generation of people. I'm going to give you something here, and it might seem like an unusual example, but I got to thinking about it because I was looking up some things on a guy who's an absolute degenerate. Several people who are absolute degenerates that are largely regarded as cultural heroes, particularly to the left, about changing people's perception. If you could change people's perception about people that you should look up to, people that you should glorify, and the reasons for which they should be looked up to and glorified, you can affect an entire culture based on just a certain given parameter of suppositions based in no evidence at all. Okay? We used to revere men like Elon Musk. Thomas Edison, right, Amerigo Vespucci or Leif Erikson, maybe. Anyway, we used to revere men like Thomas Edison. I can remember coming up through school, we were taught that Thomas Edison was a great inventor and he advanced the cause of civilization and he gave us the light bulb and the phonograph and all these things. And then you get a little older and you figure out that, pretty much everything that Edison was given credit for was stuff that he stole from Nikola Tesla. But the point is that people who became wealthy by advancing, even if it was a false premise, even if it was actually the perception that these people were advancing us as a culture, advancing us as a species, making life better for everyone, and they got rich in the process, we weren't taught to hate them simply because they had gotten rich in the process. Yeah, they captured that booster this week with a claw. And the left is trying to tell you that this guy is stupid. Richest guy on the planet, taking our species forward in a way that no one has in decades, if not over a century. And we are taught to hate the man because he is wealthy. Let me tell you something. I am not poor because Elon is rich. Okay? Leaving that to the side. In spite of everything that Elon's done, because they have planted the seed and because currently they're winning and because currently they control all the cultural touchstones and the entire cultural zeitgeist and they control the media and they control entertainment and they control academia, that is the seed that's going to be planted with regard to who Elon is. And that is going to take some shaking loose if we don't find a way to bring it back under control. You guys familiar with William Masters and Virginia Johnson? You guys familiar with these two? Pioneers, we are told. Pioneers in the field of human sexuality. And my goodness, nothing but good has come out of their research. They liberated an uptight, religiously constrictive, just stick in the mud, uptight, stick up their ass society. They liberated the sexuality of human beings, and we are a far better place for their research. And boy, I believe that. I believe that for a long time. When I stopped believing it had nothing to do with my return to the faith, I stopped believing that a long, long time ago because I actually did the homework. How about this fella, huh? Alfred Kinsey. You guys familiar with him? Oh, yeah, dude, another one. We had an uptight, stick in the mud society, man. We only had sex inside a marriage and we only did it missionary, and there was a whole countercurrent of that where people secretly were out behind dumpsters getting their groove on, guy on guy, girl on girl, dog on cat. He set us free. He liberated that biological imperative. You guys don't think I've gone off the deep end here, all right? I know that getting the groove on is a biological imperative. I know it's a powerful biological motivator. I have gone above and beyond with pushing the boundaries with regard to that. All of that made me who I am. I'm not going to turn around and be all tut-tutting, people, you want to get your groove on. You want to, dress up in a latex nun's outfit and, have your old man bounce around the living room with a carrot stuffed up his ass going, I'm the Easter Bunny, I'm the Easter Bunny. Dude, whatever your thing is, I'm not judging. The point is this. When you establish that these two doctors and this one doctor by himself brought nothing but good to the world, what was it that Zen said about telling half the story? We're not even telling a third of the story. Oh, they were pioneering researchers. No, they were not pioneering researchers. In fact, you do a little deep digging, and we could probably do a whole rabbit hole on it, but we're not. Do a little digging on who Masters and Johnson, William Masters and Virginia Johnson, who they really were, right? I mean, I've seen some pretty cool pickup lines, but hey, when you're hot for your lab assistant and say, hey, man, this new project we're working on, I think we should have intercourse, for science. Good on him. It worked. What a great pickup line. These people were basing results of studies that were largely drawn from degenerates. Why? Because at that point, degenerates were still treated like degenerates. If you were a prostitute, oh, victimless crime, oh, no, sex work is real work, yada, 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 whatever. You want to make the case that sex work is real work? Okay. You want to make the case that there is nothing wrong with that if a consenting adult volunteers to sell their toy box on the open market? I would, on principle, stand with you. But let's not act like this is a wonderful, dignified profession that people should aspire to. And my favorite argument, that it's harmless. Sorry, but I was in and out of the strip club business for over 20 years. I have seen the harm. I made a lot of money off that harm, right? So I'm the last to judge here. What I'm pointing out is how they're portrayed versus the end results of their research and the source of their research. Because they were getting their data from sex workers. They were getting their data from the dress in a trench coat and rub one out in the public library crowd. That's who their subjects were. Interspersed with some university students here and there for balance. But university students weren't the kind of people you could ask. If a sex researcher was trying to do research on sex outside the boundaries of what is socially acceptable, who are they going to talk to? Who are they going to talk to? The average college liberal or me and Ryan? Right. Now, you're going to get an accurate statement from us within the boundaries of what we do, but our tastes and our proclivities are not in any way reflective of the mainstream American public. And that is what it was extrapolated to with regard to William Masters and Virginia Johnson. And Kinsey, boy, let's just go with Kinsey. Raised by a man who was physically beaten and largely ostracized from the church because of his own sexual proclivities. And one of his biggest sources with regard to deviant sexual behavior wound up being a pedophile, not just any pedophile. But a meticulous pedophile with hundreds, plural, of documented encounters that he treated himself like a research subject, along with every little boy and little girl that he had molested. Now, is that legitimate research? Sure it is. Until you expose university students to this person without telling them that they're having sex with a pedophile. When you are doing experiments involving toddlers and trying to get them into a situation where they are eliciting sexual responses from one another, This was stuff that was done with Kinsey. This is stuff that was done with William Masters and Virginia Johnson. Now, they can obfuscate all they want and say, yeah, but that wasn't the bulk of his research, bro. I mean, you can't like lump all of his research under the thing just because he tried to get toddlers to finger bang each other. You're right. That's a factually accurate statement. I can't lump the whole of his research and quantify and put him in the box just because of what he did. But if you think that the right response is to continue to glorify the guy without qualification and just sort of sweep that little bit under the rug, you and I got nothing further to discuss, Sparky. But I'll go you one better. And I'll just wait, because some of y'all already know. Some of y'all already know. The gender thing that is going on right now. The father of your gender science, the literal laboratory research father of gender affirming care is this man right here, John Money. And I want you guys to do a little of your own homework, but I'll give you the basic breakdown on it. Kid by the name of Dave Reimer lost his cock almost fresh out of the womb in a circumcision accident. John Money made him a research project. Raised the kid as a little girl. Next to his own blood kin. Raised them as brother and sister. Every time the parents expressed apprehensions about the things that they were doing, they were put down. This is all in the interest of science. You know, the same way that this guy working with pedophiles and trying to get toddlers to touch each other was all in the interest of science. David Reimer wound up killing himself in adulthood after they had to come clean with everything that they had done. But I want you guys to do a deep dive on that. I'm not gonna do this for you. I want you guys to do the work on this one. And I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to assume that I'm lying to your face right now. I want you to assume that everything that I'm saying right now is I am outright lying to your face. About John Money, about Alfred Kinsey, about William Masters and Virginia Johnson. Why am I bringing all of this up? Because these are the experts. When you were looking at what is going on today, particularly with gender affirming care, experts say, research done by experts would indicate these are the people whose research they're basing these things on. And they are sweeping under the rug not just things that would reflect unpleasantly, but things that are literally horrific. Literally things that can't be defined with any other word but evil. Children. I don't want to hear context. You tell me context, I say children. I don't want to hear about health care. You say health care, I say children. I don't want to hear about experts. I don't want to hear about, I don't want to hear any of your backpedaling excuses, because my retort is going to be children. There is no way that you can look at what is going on in the culture right now and say that this is anything but intent. This is not incompetence. This is malice. They are doing what they are doing, and they are doing it deliberately. And you notice what I haven't done right here? I haven't made one single reference to scripture or faith in this entire argument. because I don't expect you to share my walk. I don't expect you to share my faith, but we can all recognize evil and call evil for what evil is. When you are cutting the cock off a healthy 13-year-old boy or slicing the breast off a healthy 13-year-old girl without even the necessity for parental consent. That's codified into law in at least 7 states now, by the way. Oh, that doesn't ever happen. Oh, cool. Then why did you feel it was necessary to codify it into law? Same with the abortion crowd. No woman has an abortion just hours before birth. Oh, okay. Well, then it shouldn't be a problem making it a law that she can't do that hours before birth, right? We're even past Europe now. Europe draws the line at 12 to 14 weeks. In the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, if a baby is born alive, you can literally make the decision afterwards, and that's codified into law. Look it up. Assume that I'm lying to your face. Look it up. I don't need faith to tell me that's evil. I don't need faith to tell me that, as Bill Maher so delicately put it, that the first result for a child's gender confusion is break out the dick saw is anything but evil. I don't need faith to defend that point. And if you can't accept and recognize evil for what it is, right? And you know what, Ryan? That's evil too. Yeah, yeah. The boy lovers back then. Oh yeah. And you know, and you know who loves to bring that up as a reminder? NAMBLA. You look at any piece of NAMBLA literature, they will bring that up about the Romans and Greeks and their boy thing. We had special forces soldiers that witnessed Afghans raping boys, got physical with it, and the U.S. soldiers were court-martialed. What the hell, man? How can you look at that? And yeah, this is evil too. It's evil too. I'm not a big fan of circumcision. I mean, I'm happy with my Darth Vader helmet on a personal level, but just circumcision is a de facto fallback plan. We're the only country in the developed world that still does that. We're the only country in the Western world outside of Israel that still does that. Do with that what you will. We're talking about kids, man. We're talking about kids. I don't need faith to defend that argument. When people tell you who they are, that's the bullet point that I was getting around to. When people tell you who they are, believe them. When you see these people at marches saying, we're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children, believe them. The only reference that I will make that has anything to do with faith is that it was a knee-jerk reaction for the cackling Jezebel in chief. Somebody stood up at a rally this week and said, Christ is Lord. And she said, you're in the wrong rally, sugar. You need to go to that smaller rally down the street. I don't care. I don't need her to share my faith either. But when she tells me that she's going to support gender affirming care for minors, you tell me who you are, I believe you. When you support Marxist policies, given the Marxist body count, you tell me who you are, I believe you. The point of all of this is we are sold on expertise that has its roots in darkness. We are sold on the expertise of people that have their roots in evil. And if you don't know about those roots, then when people try to sell you, thank you. When people try to sell you on things going forward, it's a hell of a lot easier to make that case. We're not talking about mutilating a 13-year-old boy. We're talking about gender affirming health care. We're not talking about going into the womb of a woman who is 7 months pregnant, splitting the skull of her child, sucking out one limb at a time with a vacuum tube. Talking about reproductive health care. The last thing that I have to say with regard to that is, if you were voting for Kamala, if every other thing, and this is for the women in particular, and I said what I said and I won't take it back. I want you to look me in the face and tell me what we both know. If you know that this regime has been a disaster, you know that Trump would be a better president, but you're voting for Kamala because of the Roe v. Wade thing, you don't have to admit it to me, but you should probably admit it to yourself, that basically what you're saying is you are willing to risk the entire collapse of Western civilization, World War III, economic hardship on your children, the terrors of Marxism and communism. You're willing to risk all of that, all so a woman that you've never met 10 years from now will have the right to electively murder her baby. Congratulations. That's some real heads up moral thinking. That's some real heads up risk versus benefit analysis right there. I hope it helps you sleep at night. When people tell you who they are, believe them. When people tell you that they are Marxist, when people show you that they are communist, when people endorse policies that are Marxist and communist, when people's fathers and mothers were Marxist professors, you remember the words of Vladimir Lenin: 3/4 of mankind may die if necessary to ensure the other quarter for communism. And by the way, if anybody checked out Pastor Shay's sermon this morning, it was fantastic. When he brought up the quotes about communism, I so wanted to jump up in the middle of the aisle and go, Pastor, I got a better one. I got a better one. This was it. 3/4 of mankind may die if necessary to ensure the other quarter for communism. Destroying the peasant economy. Oh, wow. You mean like buying up farmland and making regulations, cutting off the water supply to potato farmers in Idaho, and putting regulatory processes on them so onerous that they can't run their farms anymore to ensure the other quarter for communism, destroying the peasant economy and driving the peasant from the country to the town. Wow, there's that electoral college thing, because the peasants in the country aren't voting like our intellectual betters in the town. To drive the peasant from the country to the town, the famine creates a proletariat. It is precisely now and only now when in the starving regions people are eating human flesh and hundreds if not thousands of corpses are littering the roads that we can and therefore must carry out the confiscation of what? Of church valuables. We need to tax the churches, bro. That we can and therefore must carry out the confiscation of church valuables with the most savage and merciless energy, not stopping short of crushing any resistance. The greater the number of representatives of the reactionary clergy and reactionary bourgeoisie we succeed in executing for this reason, the better. We can let that clergy stay in power so long as they keep the alphabet flag and the BLM flags in their pulpit. These people are telling you who they are. They've been telling you who they are for years. Believe them. Simple as that. This is not healthcare. This is not affirming anything. This is evil. Simple as that. There's more. But I don't need to tell you because you already know. We're here for the fight, y'all. We're here for the fight. And I will make no peace with evil. Even if others decide that they're going to make peace with evil, I'm not obligated to follow that lead. Even if others decide that they're going to look evil in the face and refuse to call it evil, I'm not going along with that program. People that may hold a deep-seated belief, but that belief is deeply held because they're afraid to express it on the outside, I break no bread with them either. I'm going to continue to speak truth. Yeah, your truth versus my truth, bro. No, I'm going to continue to speak the truth. And if that bothers you, it probably should. This isn't just a hill that I'm willing to die on. This is a hill that I may be asked to die on. And I say that without a shred of exaggeration or hyperbole. But you know what else I say without a shred of? Fear. Fear. If I know something to be true, I will speak it as true without equivocation or apology. If I know something is false, and I will speak that it is false without equivocation or apology. If I know something is evil, I will call it out for evil without equivocation or apology, and I will continue to walk forward, knuckles up and chin down for the truth without equivocation or apology. If you're not that committed, get out now. Get out now. It's okay, man. History shows that it only takes 3% of us to turn a country. And if you walk in the faith like some of us do, faith the size of a mustard seed is going to move nations, is going to move mountains, and is going to deliver us from the jaws of evil. On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. We're going to be that rock. We're going to be that rock. Because that's what we're called to be. You don't have to share my faith, bro. You don't. But if you share a view for righteousness, if you share a view for evil, if you can discern between the innocent and the guilty, if you can discern between the light and the dark, I'll proudly stand beside you and we can be a part of that rock together. Time's not coming, it's here. I hope y'all have made your peace with whatever decision you've come to. I'm going to close with a prayer, y'all. Lord God, I appreciate every opportunity that you placed in my lap. I appreciate my calling and my anointing, Lord. I appreciate the people you put in my path to guide me and help shape me. I appreciate every adversity that you put in my path to make me harder and more willing to struggle. And I appreciate the adversities ahead that'll give me a chance to prove myself, to rise to my anointing and my calling, and to prove myself for the kingdom, Lord. I'm here to serve. I don't have answers, but I give you thanks for the opportunity to provide and share what worldview, what knowledge I have with these people. I thank you for everyone that's gathered here with me tonight. And I hope that something that I have to offer will open an eye or touch a heart or turn loose a mind that's still existing in bondage to lies, but more importantly, in bondage to fear. Because it's fear that's holding so many people back. Fear of things that aren't even real. Other people's perceptions. Imaginary phantoms of what it could cost them without taking into account what it's going to cost them if they don't break through to the other side of that fear, Lord. You admonish us in the scriptures 366 times. Do not be afraid. And that's how we're going to go forward, Lord. Me and everybody that I stand with, all of my brothers in Christ, all of my brothers in arms, we are going to go forward together for the sake of light over darkness, for the sake of truth over lies, for the sake of courage over fear, unbowed, unbroken, and unafraid. And I pray that you give us the strength to do so. I pray in the name of the risen Christ, whose blood bought my salvation and whom I ever serve. I pray that for all of my brothers, Lord. Amen. Appreciate y'all being here, man. Don't let it bug you. Don't let it bug you. It should be a mild irritant. Injustice should always provoke you in some way. Lies should always provoke you in some way. Double standards should always provoke you in some way. Somebody looking at evil and calling it good. Somebody trying to sell a predator disguised as a house pet should bother you on some deep level. But ultimately, man, just know that you've got the strength inside you. You might not even be aware of it because you might not have even been challenged to find it. But that challenge is coming. And I know that if you're here and you're listening, unless you're one of those Antifa maggots just looking to dox my ass, if you're here and you're listening, you know that strength is there. Sometimes you just need a little oomph. And if I can be that oomph, I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it. God bless each and every one of y'all, whether you're walking in the faith with me or not. I really, really appreciate y'all. I'm going to pass around the plate. You guys already know I'm on Cash App, Venmo, Facebook Pay, all that blah, 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 blah. I don't even like bringing it up, man. But at the end of the day, you know, anything that you could throw would help. But at the end of the day, I also realize that for at least another 20 odd days, we are living under a Biden-Harris economy. And part of that is being broke as a joke and not knowing how to make ends meet or which way is up. So I get it. If you can't help out, I get it. Totally cool. But here's what you can do for me. Spread the word about the program, or at least tell them about the guy who's putting it on. Fat, toothless, cripple, crane operator with some opinions. He gets on rants and raves for a couple hours every Sunday. Pretty cool guy. I think you might get what he has going on. Spread the word about it. But here's what you can do most of all, most importantly of all. Not for me, but for yourself, for y'all. Stone, you already know. What are we doing? Live the three, baby. Hashtag live the three. Live the three. What are you talking about? Talking about the 3 prime directives is what I'm talking about. 3 prime directives, that's right, man. Signal versus noise. The signal to noise ratio in the modern zeitgeist is all screwed up right now. Too much noise, too much noise. It's obfuscating the signal. It's obfuscating the truth. Too many clouds of lies and deceptions obfuscating the truth. You have got to be the signal that punches through the noise. Light in the darkness. You got to be the one to carry that light. They'll try to bury you in the darkness. Convince you there's nothing but darkness. Emasculate you, demoralize you, dehumanize you in the darkness. You have got to be the light. You got to be the one to carry that light, which brings us to rule number 3, the iron rule, the prime directive. You have got to be strength in a world full of weakness. And I'm not just talking about this kind of strength. It's got to be here and here and even here. Why? Because without strength, none of the rest of it matters. If you don't carry strength, you won't be able to punch that signal through the noise. Hell, you might not even be able to discern the signal from the noise. If you don't have strength, you won't have the endurance to carry that light through the darkness, let alone the punch to drive that light to the other side of the darkness. So strength above everything. And when you pray, strength, clarity, and discernment always. Don't get caught up in the hardships. Take the time to count your blessings. And brother, we are blessed. We are blessed beyond words. God bless each and every one of y'all. Appreciate y'all being here, man. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. See you next Sunday, y'all. I love you, man. God bless. Take care. Peace.